Hi, everybody. My name's Paul Wallace. I'm a journalist at Bloomberg based in Dubai, and I'm here with two fascinating and inspiring people, Sylvia Earle and Razan Al Mubarak. Sylvia Earle is president and chairman of Mission Blue and the Sylvia Earle Alliance. She's a National Geographic Society explorer and is known by her nickname as her deepness for all the time she spent underwater studying oceans. Razan is a UAE native who for more than 20 years has played a vital role in guiding her country toward a more sustainable future. Sylvia and Razan, thank you both for joining us. I'm going to start by asking you the first question. And can you explain to us what the difference and also the similarities are between climate change and biodiversity loss?
Well, at the recent COP26 conference in Glasgow, it was clear that climate change and biodiversity loss are inextricably connected. This is a living planet. This is not just rocks and water. Earth is alive, and it's suitable for the existence of life as we know it now because of the long history of life on Earth that shapes the climate, that shapes the weather, that makes the chemistry, the temperature of the planet hospitable for the likes of us in a universe that's really not very friendly to life as we know it. So the loss of biodiversity, the network, the fabric of life that makes Earth what it is a cause for real concern. But now we know, and we can do something about the trajectory that it's taking us in a very, very bad place.
And Razan, I'd like to get your views on that same question.
So first of all, let me just start by saying I'm completely starstruck here. So if I'm unable to put two sentences together, then please forgive me. Your deepness, Sylvia, absolutely. I think they are very much, the two issues are inextricably linked. But at the same time, one needs to recognize that they're also very different because they have different drivers and different solutions. Of course, they have common culprits and common champions. A big common culprit that is agriculture. Half of the Earth's planet has been converted to agriculture, destroying natural ecosystems.
Right.
And then on the other hand, 70% of the agricultural land is used for livestock, which contributes to around 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So for sure, addressing and reframing how we feed ourselves is essential to both climate change and the biodiversity narrative. And a common champion to both are nature-based solutions. So if we are able to protect natural landscapes that provide vital ecosystem services, we are able to contribute to 30% of the required needed climate change mitigation by 2030. So in short, if we don't protect nature, if we don't protect this incredible fabric of life, then we cannot meet our climate change goals.
I totally endorse what you're saying and understand that economists tend to follow the money. Scientists and climate scientists in particular are following the carbon. Blue carbon, the ocean, the contribution of the ocean to the cycles that really maintain the planet that works in our favor. And what you have articulated about agriculture and conversion of the natural systems to human purposes. Agriculture is the big one, but cities and the infrastructure for transportation, all of these things have had a real cost to this fabric of life. And the ocean, it's taken us longer. It's taken us about 10,000 years to really convert so much of the land to, mostly in recent times, but it has a long history. The ocean has remained relatively intact until about the middle of the 20th century to the present time. We have really considerably altered the nature of the ocean that has a primary function based on blue carbon, if you will, generating oxygen, capturing carbon, holding the planet steady in terms of temperature. And that's where a lot of the damage has been done in recent times, and also where we have a real opportunity to change our ways and really safeguard these systems that keep us alive.
And sort of following on from that point, and not to sound facetious, but what do you think is more important out of climate change and biodiversity loss? And obviously they're inextricably linked to each other. But what would your answer be to that question? And I'll start with you, Razan.
So, I mean, as we just kind of said, it's difficult to de-link them, right? So they are very much linked to the resilience of our planet. And the resilience of our planet is from a selfish point of view, is very much linked to our own resilience, the resilience of our own species. And that's why I subscribe to this One Health principle. So you need a healthy planet and ecosystem to be able to provide for a diverse diversity of species, this diverse tapestry of life, of which we are one of those species.
Right.
But one person once explained to me that one could look at the climate change narrative as a mismanagement of nature. So if you are able to address our relationship with nature, then we're able to also fundamentally change the way we believe we interact with this planet. And this kind of, and Sylvia, I mean, recently I've been really interested in this narrative of, you know, is it our duty to protect nature, or is it our right to use nature? And this sort of kind of, you know, the difference between our duty and our right, particularly in this new context where just a few months ago, I believe the UN human rights body voted that a clean environment is a fundamental human right. And I've always had an issue with right, because when a relationship based on rights is sometimes a relationship based on taking, on using, while a relationship based on duty is a duty of care. I wonder whether you could kind of help guide me in this sort of warped world of rights versus duties.
Well, it's common sense that you take care of the systems that keep you alive. Astronauts high in the sky first learn everything they can about their life support system, and then they do everything they can to take care of it. If they don't, they die. But humankind has made big inroads into the very systems that keep us alive, the natural planet. And of course, all creatures, humans, birds, whatever, use the world around them to foster their prosperity. But no species has taken so much of the natural world and consumed so much so fast, with our numbers now approaching 8 billion people, 10 billion perhaps by the middle of the century. We really have to behave ourselves and respect what it is, the water, the land, the ocean, but especially the fabric of life itself. That term that we both use, the fabric of life, it's this interconnected nature of nature that we have, you know, until right about now, we could not see it. We did not know how important old growth forests were, that the life in the soil itself, it's not just rocks and water, it's not just a physical planet that keeps us alive, it's a living system, that we're only beginning to glimpse the importance of microbes, and even to identify the big categories of life that share Earth with us. And we need them, but now they need us to restore health to this damaged system that we've created. We expect it to keep going no matter how much we take or how many toxins we put into the air, into the land, or into the ocean. But now we know. That's really cause for hope.
I'd like to ask both of you what you think about the progress, or perhaps the lack of progress, that has been made when it comes to protecting the biodiversity and slowing climate change in the last 2 years. I don't know if it's by sheer coincidence or if it's something to do with the coronavirus pandemic and all the ructions that's caused globally. But definitely from my field, and I cover energy at Bloomberg, and there does really seem to have been a big push as far as the global energy transition is concerned, and the push towards net zero targets among companies and countries, and generally the push towards more renewable forms of energy. I'd just like to get your views on that, and I'll start with you, Razan. Are you optimistic by what you've seen in the last 1 or 2 years, or do you think whatever progress has been made is still far too little?
I'm an optimist, and I do agree with you, Paul, with your assessment. The global narrative is moving towards recognizing the threats that climate change bring, and you see those discussions now in the mainstream, where perhaps even 10 years ago, it was overconsumed with climate change deniers and so forth, where now the consensus is that it's there and we need to act on it, and we can. Technology is there. Perhaps the only caveat there is that it seems to be the narrative seems to very much still be within the global north rather than the global south. And we need to be able to democratize this narrative and to really look at it from a global and particularly a global south perspective. And the solutions and the global south needs to be at the forefront of our thinking, which at the moment, I don't see that necessarily happening. The other thing that I don't perhaps see happening is while there has been, and our attention has been focused on COP26, institutions like Bloomberg and others have raised a lot of awareness on what's happening in COP26. My message is that we must not neglect the upcoming COP15 in China, which is focusing on biodiversity. And what I believe, we were both saying in the conversation is biodiversity loss must not play second fiddle to climate change. Because contrary to many assumptions, addressing the climate change problem will not fundamentally reverse the decline of biodiversity. And we don't want a planet where climate has stabilized, but is devoid of life. We've already lost 60% of terrestrial animals, 90% of big ocean fish, and about half of our natural ecosystems. And we are also at risk of losing 1 million species, or up to 1 million species over the next few decades if we don't act now.
So that's very interesting. Sylvia, I'd like to ask you about that. I mean, do you think there is a danger, as Razan says, that we may be able to stabilize climate change, i.e. stabilize or, slow temperature rises, but at the same time not do enough to protect biodiversity?
I think it will be difficult to stabilize climate unless we protect biodiversity, unless we protect the life, because it has taken 4.5 billion years to work on the transition from a barren planet to one that is now thriving and works in our favor. It's taken us a very few decades to unravel the basic underpinnings of what makes Earth habitable. So we should not have separate conversations. This is a totally integrated conversation. And the pandemic, I believe, has awakened us to our vulnerability to the laws of nature. We have our own laws, but unless they respect the basic framework of the reality of how the world functions, we will never have a prosperous future. But the good news, I think, is that this is the sweet spot in time when for the first time we're able to put things together in ways that we could not when I was a child. We know the real question that we are staring us in the face is, do we have the will, really, to acknowledge the importance of nature to our economy, to our health, to our security, basically to our very survival? This is the moment when we have the chance, the next 10 years, looking at 30% of the planet fully protected in the next 10 years, and to really respect all of it, certainly half by the middle of the century, but to really put into perspective that we're a part of nature, not apart from it. And Razan has articulated so well the situation that we now face, and the opportunity, as never before, we know, as never again, we've got the chance to shape a future that works in our favor.
Razan and Sylvia, thank you very much. That's been fascinating. And I'm glad we've also finished on a positive note. As you say, Sylvia, we've got that opportunity to make a difference. And I think that's something that's very important to bear in mind. So both, thank you very much for being with us today.